Okay, I think I got it. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly well.
Okay, and I can see and what I'm looking at is way down in the right-hand corner, there was a little box that had me in it, and I tapped on it, and now it has you in it. But where I really see you is over on the left-hand side. I see the whatever you've put up on the screen, filling the majority of the screen, and then I see you over on the left-hand side,
Yep.
kind of right in the middle.
And then we're gonna do a few sound tests with video. So I'm gonna clap, and if you're looking at the video, we'll see the timing of the clap and the
Yep.
timing of the.
That was no, I do it again. Well, that time I didn't hear it at all. That time I didn't hear it at all either. I'm not hearing it. The first time I heard it with no lag, and now I'm not hearing anything.
Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Odd.
But
That's
the
weird.
first time I heard your clap.
Okay, I'm gonna try moving the microphone. Give me a second.
Okay. And when I did hear the clap, if there was a lag, it was imperceptible to me.
Okay. I've decided not to mess with that. Let's see. Okay, today's experiment is really seeing if the quality of our recording is working. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording in OBS. Then I'm going to go to the folder where OBS saves. And I'm sorry, Larry, this is going to be a little dry, but it's important for me to.
Oh, that's fine. It's dry. It's dry to you. It's all new to me, so I find it fascinating. Yeah. And I'm lying down, Michael. So if it gets too boring, I can just close my eyes until something interesting.
Okay, that works. So I'm going to the location that supposedly this machine saves its videos. And then
Michael, just wait. Let's pause for just a second. This is a major accomplishment.
Yeah.
To have done this.
It's pretty cool.
Because I'm not. I mean, probably somebody who does this for a living would say, no, there's a 3 nanosecond delay. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't notice anything.
I love it. Feels good. So theoretically, now we have a show with a format. There's a couple of things that I want to solve for the show. For instance, I'd like to be able to bring up, just as you see my head right now,
right?
I'd like to be able to bring up another head or two, right? If they had green screens, or at the very minimum, I'd like to be able to bring them up here, right, on this like screen. But the other thing I'd like to be able to do is make sure that when I record us speaking to each other, that I get high quality audio from all of us, not you too quiet, not, I want to get high quality audio. And I actually care about the audio more than the quality of the video, even though there's beautiful scenes in the game, and it's really about the audio. So
right. Now, when the one and only time where I think I told you I attended a Zoom AA meeting because a friend of mine was moderating it, and half the participants were in Australia and half of them were here, and he was the one who sent me the invite. He was able to control. He was able to change my settings.
Yes.
For the moderator, so to decide, which was bigger, which was smaller. I have set my settings on Zoom to microphone always on. On the assumption that we'll be dealing with people who won't try and all talk at the same time.
Yeah, I think we can assume that
rather than,
because-
because like at an AA meeting, they have it set usually so that the moderator has to let somebody talk, or otherwise
Right.
everybody will be talking at the same time.
Right, if I go to the Zoom window and I look at it and I click on Larry Strikeman, I can mute you, right? I'm not going to do that, but
Yeah, right. That's what he could do too. He
Right.
could turn somebody off if he wanted to. And
Right,
actually,
and
they
I could
wouldn't.
also-
And actually, they wouldn't. I don't think they would even know it. Though you'd see them still talking down there in the,
Yeah.
but you just wouldn't hear them.
yeah, and I can also, in the recording, I can say hide non-video participants. And if I'm recording, because I'm right now testing, I'm doing 2 recordings simultaneously. One is from Zoom to my hard drive. And so whatever I see in my Zoom window is the recording. So one of the questions I had is, do I want to have a box that says Larry Strikeman, but no picture, right? Or do I need to make you put in a picture? And what I've learned is that I can just turn off your box because you're not sharing video. If you're not sharing video, I can say hide non-video
You mean the
participants.
little box in the corner?
What?
You mean the little box in the lower right-hand corner?
Remember, what you see and what I see is not always the same
Oh,
when it
right.
comes to
Okay.
Zoom. So yes, in my case, the little box in the corner said Larry
I
Strikeman.
just tapped on the little box in the corner and it went to black and just shows a white silhouette of, a head and shoulders.
Right. And what I did was I went to right click on it, which I think is hold on an iPad, and where you press and hold. And what it allowed me to do was say hide non-video participants. And because I had already pinned my video, because you remember I said try pin,
Right.
I became the only shot. So whatever I put through the ATEM, which is the screen, the stars field, or my green screen with the side table,
Is that the
cabinet.
newly clean? Is that the newly cleaned green screen?
Yes, I had to use a steamer.
I've never
And
known
it's-
anybody that, back when I started in TV, the only way to get special effects was green screens.
Right.
I've never actually known somebody who had one at home.
They're becoming very common now, like very, because all the people have to work on Zoom all day long. They don't want their apartment behind them. So they buy a green screen and then they make it look like they're anywhere they want to be.
Like they're on a tropic isle.
Yeah, and Zoom has that integrated. So if you had a green screen, you could put any background you wanted behind you.
Wow.
Yeah, in a Zoom call, but we don't have to deal with that right now. And
No, I
they've gotten
don't.
quite easy to set up and cheap, but okay, so I'm recording via Zoom, and hopefully everything we've been saying to each other, plus the background noise of the game, is going into the recording. Oh, speaking of which, can you hear the game?
Can I hear the
Here, I'm
game?
gonna- yeah,
Well, right now, what I'm looking at is you're filling the. Now I see the game.
so I'm gonna go faster and make a loud noise in the game.
Yes, I can hear it.
So you can hear that.
It's a little on the low side, but well, I heard something when you got started. I'm not hearing anything at the moment.
Okay, so you're not hearing anything at the moment.
Well, I'm hearing you.
Yeah, but I mean the ambient noise of the game.
No, when you first started something, I heard something.
Right. You heard somebody say friendship drive charging,
No, no, it was more like a noise.
like a rumble.
You know what? I don't.
I'm going to do it again. This is the booster.
That I can certainly hear. That sounded like a rocket. That sounded like like 3 seconds before takeoff when the burners turn on.
Yep, that's what it is.
Okay.
And then this is charging the Witch Space drive, the drive that lets us travel between stars. Ready?
Frameshift drive charging.
I heard a voice. I couldn't understand it, but I could hear it.
So that implies that in our recording, I've got the game audio set too low. That's what it implies. We don't
Well,
know
that's
that for sure.
possible. It's also possible. It's a product. fa- a, um, a trait of my iPad.
It could be, but remember, if we're going to interview other people using their iPads, we have to solve for that.
And
So
it's also possible that now that this is working, if I had a Bluetooth connected, I probably could hear
you
everything
might hear
better.
more. Yeah. But we'll find out when you get the Bluetooth. I'm not going to mess with the audio settings on that side,
Okay.
but I am going over to what we call my microphone PC. It's a special PC just for the microphone for me. And
Okay.
it's not the same as the PC that's doing the recording. And I have to go to sound settings and open sound settings and go to control panel. And then I have to go to recording. And then I have to go to the microphone and go to properties. And there's this tab called listen. And currently I have it checked to say, listen to this device. And what that does is it lets me hear that what the device is piping through right now. I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to hit a
Now I can't hear you. I can see your face moving, and that's it.
Okay, you can hear me again.
I can hear you again, and I can hear your ethereal music.
Yes, that's the background of the game
Okay.
because we're inactive, so it's playing music to us, trying to coax us back into the game. So that's interesting. So you couldn't hear me, and that means that Zoom couldn't hear me. All right, that's it. Oh, okay. So let me try.
I
change one more
don't
setting.
remember. I think in my settings on Zoom, there were some settings involving audio, and I'll have to go back after we do this today and take a look and see. But I think I had set everything so that anybody could hear anything. I don't think I had like
No,
turned
it's
off.
definitely not on your side. This is a problem that I introduced in the setup. I had two amazing conversations this week. One with a professional audio engineer for TV. And that was awesome. And the other one was with a professional telephony guy, a person who understands digital telephone systems like Zoom. And in both cases, they walked through my setup with me and were trying to help me figure out what I was
So
doing.
is Zoom basically a
Larry, can you hear me?
VoIP with pictures?
Give me a sec, Larry. Gotta fix it. Say something. Say something now. Wow. One more second. How about now? Larry? Okay. How could I have lost Larry?
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
I
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. What I wanted to ask, I would just want to ask, were you sort of talking to yourself there, and sort of mumbling, or and is that why I couldn't
No, I
understand?
changed the setting and I lost your audio.
Oh,
So I should stop doing that. But I was trying to figure out why I hear an echo of my own voice in my ears.
oh, that's maddening.
Yeah, so what I have to do is right now I have to wear the headphones not really on my ears, right? So that there's a little distance between me and the echo. And I'm also testing whether or not the recording settings work. And what I want is a situation where I can record us speaking. I can hear the game, you can hear the game, we can hear each other, and the recordings record all three sources of audio. And I don't hear an echo in my ears. those are the three. Those are the kind of things I want, and I can get any two. So, but it's miraculous that we're using Zoom. We're also using this studio software in the ATEM so that I can have my floaty head and you and I are talking to each other. And presumably one of the two recordings is going to have at least the three of us sound. So if the only problem is the
as I said,
echo,
I don't
we'll deal with
obviously understand none of the tech behind it, nor do I need to, but that you managed to solve this lag problem is clearly with some help is like a major achievement.
well, when I actually get productive, I get productive.
Yes, boy, I understand that one very well.
Yeah. The trick was, Larry, is what we started talking about in the beginning, is to get productive without the damage, right? I was talking to a friend about this.
Without doing damage.
Right, like to others or myself, right? So I trained myself my entire life to be either at 110 miles per hour or 0. Those were my two modes. And my new life for the last decade has been trying to learn how to be at 40 miles per hour, 60 miles per hour. Right now, I'm pretty good at going about 30, and that's not really acceptable. But I can't mentally get from 30 to 60.
It's a giant step from either off or on all the way.
Yeah, and on all the way would damage me physically. I just couldn't do it anymore. It was going to kill me.
Understand. The same can be said. I mean, I can associate with it emotionally in terms of the degree of involvement that you decide that you want to have in a certain situation. Like maybe something's going on with a friend and you want to be helpful, but I have to fight the urge to want to take over and make everything okay.
Right.
Yeah. Usually because I know that even though I think I can, based on a lifetime of actual empirical experience, the truth is I can't, and secondly, it then becomes consuming in a way which makes it not something that's pleasurable. It becomes a task, a like required task.
Yeah, it's for me emotionally. It felt like I was
being genuinely connected and involved, but not to the extent that you see yourself as having to take on responsibility for making sure everything goes right for everybody.
Right, and I call that going nuclear. Like, and I think it has to do with me growing up and having these two things of. One, whether or not we agree with the diagnosis of ADD or whatever, I definitely have something where my attention works differently. And growing up in an environment where my intelligence worked differently than everything that in the world that told people that they were or were not intelligent. So I had this, C+ average and had trouble completing tasks, but at the same time I was perceived by so many to be this really, really, really smart kid. So what happens is I get all this feedback saying Michael doesn't apply himself. And I'm like,
I kept hearing you say that you didn't apply yourself, where it was vastly more complicated than that.
Yeah, right. And so in order to solve for that, you end up just making everything an emergency.
Yeah.
Right? Because that defeats any kind of attention span problems.
There was a point when I was turning the corner in psychotherapy when I was seeing the guy who died at 57 in his sleep and who was the mentor of the guy I see now. I'll try. Mike was the first psychiatrist. Zeb is the one I see now. There was a point with Mike where partly because of he put me on antidepressants. Early on, he because I originally went to see him because my CDC counselor, my chemical dependency counselor, I had IBS, and she said, you do this when you somatize things when you're going through some inner struggle, and this one's too is out of my ken, and I think you need to see a psychiatrist. And I whined and complained, but my GP, who knows me well, found just the right kind of guy. But between that and some therapy, I remember saying to him one day, only in hindsight do I realize I used to feel like it was my job to make sure the sun rose in the morning and set in the evening. And now I don't feel that way. And it's like I've lost my job.
Yeah. I know that feeling very well. That's exactly what trying to learn how to go only 30 miles per hour instead of 110.
It was like, well, if I'm not responsible for that, then I'm not responsible for anything.
Right.
But learning that there's an infinite spectrum in between those things, is if your natural state, for whatever reason, and it usually does have a lot to do with family, is to be all on or all off. It's work.
And so this whole journey, the ship, you agreeing to be on the TV, even though we're not broadcasting this one, but we might edit it later, right? If it all works. It's wonderful because it gives me just the right amount of pace, but also difficulty. Like, this is not easy, but at the same time, it's worth doing, and there's a higher cause and all sorts of things involved with it that make me feel good. But it also allows me to, when things break down or when I kind of get out of sync, I can just go, I'm not going to touch it for a day or two and come back. It's okay.
Yeah, that sounds like for you, that's a huge emotional accomplishment.
Yes. Sorry, I interrupted you. Larry, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just watching what's on the screen. That's all.
Yeah, I'm doing a slow pan of our ship while we talk. I think that's just a fun thing to do for about ship. So I wrote a check this week, and our developer is at work.
Wow.
Code. And what's going to happen is
what's his name?
Jasper. I love his name. Jasper. Yao.
Jasper and Duncan.
Yep, Duncan Blake. And he reminds me a lot of what a dwarf would look like. He's like a dwarven guy. A dwarven guy. Like if dwarves were real. Duncan
okay.
Although he's tall, so it's not about height. It's just
which is no longer an acceptable term, by the way.
Yes.
You're supposed to say little person.
Yes.
Despite the fact that midgets and dwarves have nothing in common other than the fact that they're smaller than average size. You're not allowed to differentiate anymore. Say someone is a midget or a dwarf, because somehow there's something pejorative about it.
Yeah. Well, we're going through a phase where the world is learning what they can afford to pay attention to. You know what it is? I actually had a thought about this, Larry, the other day. What is it? The prisoner's dilemma? I forgot the name of the sociological study that proved this, but I think it's the prisoner's dilemma. It's the thing where if you and I have to choose okay, we have a choice. Each of us has one choice to make. We either choose to trust each other, and then we both get benefit, or one of us chooses to trust the other and the other chooses to betray the other, and in which case the person who chooses to betray gets double their reward. Gets double the regular reward. Or we both betray each other, in which case neither of us gets anything. And there were a bunch of sociological studies done where a bunch of business majors decided that to win in negotiations, you always betray the other person.
Well, that explains why the world's so fucked up.
Right. And so what happened is that the GOP kind of adopted this MBA attitude, and it became sort of the de facto way of dealing with Democrats. And what I think we experienced in the last 5 years is the far left saying, "Well, fine, two can play at that game. Defund the police, or you can't differentiate between dwarf and midget, or like uh, you can, I think that the extreme positions that we're experiencing have a lot to do with this overemphasis on the human nature to reduce everything to this prisoner's dilemma insight, because it's kind of creeping through um, organizations like the GOP and the MBA community. And I think it's had a huge detrimental effect on the ability to invest in anything that's cooperative.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, in order to win, you have to prove how the prisoner's dilemma is, yes, an interesting insight, but it's not a way to run your life. Like, you're actually destroying your life, not wonderful. And it has to do with what's the value of winning if there's nothing left to win.
Well, I think I mean, not that there may be very specific moments in time where it's necessary, depending on what's at stake. To betray, it if tricking Hitler into something would and betraying him into making himself vulnerable would have been acceptable.
Right.
But to do it as just as a matter of it's the only way you haven't quote won a negotiation unless you have betrayed the other person.
Right.
Is frequently actually you don't know what it is that you didn't get if you had handled it another way.
Well, it's almost like saying a short-term win is always better than a sustainable win.
Well, what our entire it seems to me, and Zeb and I have talked about this, that the world has, like certainly American business, we have in many parts of American culture, it's instant gratification and instant reward, and
right.
and whatever. I mean, a very simple, silly example is I needed a new rug, and the last time I bought an all wool 8x10 rug, it cost like maybe $2,700, and I thought it was an outrageous amount of money, but it lasted forever, but it just didn't work in the new place. But it was 15 years ago, and when I went to look at them now they're like $7,500. And the vast majority of including very upscale rugs are either made entirely of or include a synthetic material that's called viscose.
Viscose, okay.
Yeah, VISCOSE. It's sort of like nylon, and it's derived from plant material that is somehow made into fibers, and the fibers are incredibly soft and silky and have the sheen of silk, and a rug made from them looks like a silk rug and feels like a silk rug. The only problem is that what I read was, it said a wool fiber can be bent and as in walked on or something 60,000 times before it will break. A cotton one will handle 40,000. A viscose one will handle somewhere around 60, not 60,000, just 60.
Just 60, right?
60. You can't spill anything on it, including water, because the water does something to the material, which brings up a yellow stain out of the material that it's made of, and you have to rotate. You have to rotate it every 3 months, or in order to prevent uneven fading. and someone at a, you know, one of the big companies like, you know, Crate and Barrel or Pottery Barn was asked about, you know, this, and they said the current generation of buyers are not concerned about longevity or you know, usefulness over time. They're only concerned about what it looks like now.
Wow.
And they
That's the problem.
the fact that it will be a piece of shit in 18 months, it just isn't in their mindset to worry about that.
Because they're going to get rid of it anyway, or whatever.
It looks like it looks really expensive and cool, and that's their only criterion.
Wow.
Oh, the other thing, when I was reading about it, because I, you know, to see about you, when you vacuum it, you know, you have to find a vacuum with no motorized brush, and you can only vacuum in one direction.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then like, you know, when you get to the end of the rug, turn the vacuum around, and so that it only, so it, you know, everything about it just sounded like, you know, talk about high maintenance. But nobody asks about those things who buys them. They just go, oh, this is really pretty, and I can afford it.
Wow, Larry, that's making the point exactly that I was thinking about, which is this. This idea that
you get softer sometimes. Your voice.
Yes, and that's one of the audio balance issues that I have to solve, is that as this gets louder and I'm talking, the program is hearing this spike in audio and softening us both. So that's a challenge. I have to.
Yeah, it does sound like it sort of decides that it sort of preempts you.
Yeah, it just goes, it's all too loud. I'm just gonna fix that for you. And so, and that's what I want to play with. That's the next phase of play, is to really balance the audio really well, so that the loudest noises that the game makes fit with our conversation, but we don't completely lose the ambient noise of a still ship, right? Because right now it's all just a little out of whack. It's not quite right. I mean, at least it's not deafening or screeching, you know, doing an
right. No. And when your mouth moves, the words that come out are in sync with your mouth.
Yeah, I know. So that's pretty big.
Which does make a difference.
Yeah. So, for instance, I can go to options. Just in the game, I can change the audio here, and I can make the sound effects quieter. But if I do that this way, I lose the ambient audio when we're being just normal conversation and the ship's not moving anywhere, right? So it's a bit of an issue. I could have the ship's voice talk pretty loud, because then it's like the ship's interrupting us, which I like, right? So when I do that, now the ship moves fine, but when I do this, she'll be really loud. Listen to her voice.
Frameshift drive charging.
And I'll turn it off. The problem, though, actually to do with this very special screen in the ATEM software that lets me set this thing called compressor, and a threshold and a ratio for when it triggers muting me down, making me sound quieter. So I could set the threshold higher, right? So negative, that's higher or lower. I don't know if a negative number means a higher or lower. So I'd have to learn. So I set it at a very high threshold, right?
So have you disappeared from the screen because you chose it on purpose?
Oh, I just forgot to turn myself on.
There you are. Okay.
So remember, Larry, how you said when I was doing the jump, you said, oh, sometimes it just kind of makes you quieter.
Right.
So now the question is, if I make all the noise does it make me quieter at the same time? So I'm going to do that, and we'll see
Okay.
if I get quieter.
Frame shift
So
drive
I'm
charging.
doing it. I'm still talking. The noise gets louder, and you can hear the engines trying to compete with me, trying to.
I'm not actually hearing the engines much, but I can hear you.
Yeah. Here, and that was pretty loud.
There was a point there where you seemed to drop out.
Yeah. So we hit the threshold when I did the jump, and it just kind of muted me.
Maybe we'll both just have to, maybe you already know, maybe we'll just both have to learn Universal Sign Language.
We could, but then I would not learn my audio engineering, which is what I want.
Yes, and it would somewhat limit to your niche marketing.
Yes. Although,
Hey,
Corebox,
hey, deaf people.
we have a show for you. All right, so now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to set the threshold at the other end, and we're going to see if that causes it to behave differently. So first, we'll scan this system. Nine bodies of planet that nobody's ever seen before. We should find those. So what else should we talk about, Larry? What else? Oh.
Well, I was thinking about something that is actually such a big topic that I'm not even sure quite how to get into it. But it's about that question of what constitutes productive dialogue, and at least when I was slightly stoned, when I actually sometimes have useful insights both about myself and about other things when I'm slightly stoned. It's almost like a filter is lowered so that certain as if some of my thinking, which normally doesn't make it all the way to the top, is available. And what I was thinking was, ultimately, assuming that you've chosen a different path than the way to win is always to betray what you see as opponent. The absolute key, and I can see where this will be a major hurdle in AI is empathy. That the ability and I for years I thought empathy meant particularly sensitive sympathy, and I came to understand that that's not true at all. Mm-hmm. That empathy is the ability to have some idea of how another person walks through a world and sees it differently than the way you see the world that you're walking through, even though you're both walking through the same space. And that the thoughts that are going through their head and the reasons they're saying things they're saying are not the same as if you were saying them. When they say them, they may mean something very different, but right. You have to understand something about their inner life in order to understand that. And to make deeper contact with them, you have to use your own intelligence to find a way to talk to that inner life of the other person.
So in language, normal everyday language, like what you and I are using to talk right now, what indicates that I'm even trying to connect with your inner perceptive world or framework of the world around a same word that I currently have a definition of? So if I said, I think empathy is a sense, and you say sense, and like we try to connect on that. what's the indicator in our language that we're sometimes
I don't know that there are indicators specifically in the language, and I don't think it's something that you can like pick up on and learn in one or two or three or four like meetings or conversations. It 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 um it it, it it's something that where you put together pieces of you you put together pieces of information from everything that you do with that person or learn about that person that for me, for instance, this is when I was very first starting with Zeb. There was a day when I got there and he just looked like I had an early morning appointment and he already looked just wrecked. And I said,
wow.
boy, boy, you look like you're having a lousy day already. And he said, oh, I've got this adorable little 8-year-old autistic boy, and he's trying so hard and having such a hard time. And then he just sort of trailed off. But first of all, it told me that, as opposed to what I had always thought about psychiatrists, he actually he became emotionally involved with
Mm-hmm.
the emotions of especially the children that he won't tell me what it is that happened to him that made him decide to be a child psychiatrist, but clearly something did. Now flash forward a couple of months, and he came to the waiting room to get me, and he opened the door and he said, "Hi, Larry." And I said, "One of those mornings?" And by now I was walking toward his office and he was behind me. And he said, "Why did you say that?" And I said, "Because your voice had the quality it gets when one of your kids or their families or both are going through the ringer and you're going through it with them."
Mm.
And from behind me, he said, "Larry, that shows extraordinary empathy." And at the time, I said, "Oh, thanks." But I didn't at the time realize that it is how few people have it.
Right.
And it was simply that I knew that he became involved emotionally with his kids in a way that was deeper, that was more painful to him if things were hard on the kids than perhaps maybe with adults. And it's true, it was partly his voice, and it was partly simply, and I hate to use it like that, it was like the energy field that came off him.
Right. It's hard for us to name the source of an insight. Human beings are taking in so much data and throwing out so much data that when we derive an insight that it's hard for other humans to even comprehend, right? Because many people don't have, like you said, that's an exceptionally high empathy thing to do. It's hard for even ourselves to successfully describe where it came from.
Yeah, it is. I can't, because it isn't always as obvious. That's a reasonably obvious one, in that a tangible thing happened, and I thought, oh, I just learned something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a repetition of behavior that told that made me think something similar was going on in that moment.
Right.
But a lot of it isn't even where it's something that specific. It's just it's what people wear and how they sit, and what facial gestures they make when you say certain things, and it's impossible to describe, really.
And yet
Brainchips drive child change.
somebody like Zeb is capable of recognizing when it occurs.
Yeah, and he considers it the keystone of human connections.
Right.
Is the ability to imagine. You don't have to. You'll never fully understand, even remotely, another person's true, complete inner life, but you
Right.
can understand some of it, and you can at least understand that we walk through the world thinking we see the way things are, and anybody who sees it, and everybody else who has any brains must see it the same way, and
Right.
that's not true.
Right.
That in some cases it's because they're simply wrong or crazy, but in some cases it's just because the world they grew up in, certain things mean things to them that they don't mean to me, and vice versa.
Mhm.
Looking at a gas pump, I think of the story that I told you about, me and being afraid to fill my gas tank.
Right.
It isn't uppermost in my mind, but it's part of my experience of putting gas in my car.
Right.
Where somebody who did it from the time they were 6 years old, when their dad showed them how to do it and made it their job, it has no emotional content other than maybe something to do with their relationship with their father.
Or the feeling of daily drudgery, right? That's an emotion too, right? That's a thing that we trigger.
And that when you're trying to come to a place where a negotiation or working through just a difference of opinion is your goal is for both people to feel that good about it.
Right.
The ability to understand that the other person isn't you.
Well,
in a different costume.
But you can have three people at a negotiation table, side A, side B, and the facilitator. Person A and B may lack the ability to accomplish what you described.
Right.
But if the facilitator does, then a successful negotiation can occur, and A and B can leave the table feeling like they got what they wanted without actually having gained a deep insight into B.
Right? I've never quite thought of it that way, but that absolutely is what makes a good arbiter or mediator or something, is because often my real estate agent who found me the place where I am now and sold my house, he's in his 70s and he's just very wise, said,
Mhm.
It's all about emotions.
Yep.
And what people tell you they want or tell you is making them angry often are not at all what's actually going on. And you have to figure out what it is they're really angry about or what it is they really want. And they've drawn a line in the sand and say, if these people don't fix the chimney, the deal's off. And you're talking about a $6 million house and a $3,000 job.
Right.
And you have to figure out, okay, it isn't really about the chimney. They are upset about something else, something about loss of control. And if you can think of something else to offer them that gives them the sense that they have been listened to and given the opportunity to make a choice that the other person can also live with, they'll go, well, yeah, you know what, that would be okay. We could do that instead, even though they have no idea why. it is, but because the mediator sees what's going on below the surface.
Right. And the only time the mediator is completely flummoxed is when the only way the other person is happy is if they know they've successfully betrayed the other person.
Right.
And then it's like, well, that's like playing Risk, not to win, but to make sure you lose.
Right. Zeb said Zeb said the one psychiatric disorder which is impossible to treat is a borderline personality, which in its full-blown form is clinical narcissism, because borderline personalities have completely lacked the ability to have any empathy for other people. They only see them as how they fit into their needs and world, and they that the other person also has a life. It just isn't.
It doesn't register.
It's like being deaf. It's a skill that they lack.
Right.
You can't teach it to them, and they can never accept responsibility for something for the reason why something isn't going well. At least partly, it might partly be their behavior, because their behavior to them by definition is always right.
Yeah. So we're trying to build an AI that obviously isn't going to have high empathy. It's just not possible, but it's going to be better than zero.
What you said is very interesting. It doesn't have to. It just has to be able to recognize what might be being, what's actually on the table, as opposed to what's theoretically what's being discussed in theory.
Yes. And one of the ways it does that, this was interesting trying to design it, or actually theoretically design, because it's not actually working yet. But CoreVox had one problem, which is, let's say that there's 100 people and they're talking about X. X is a variable. And CoreVox early on sort of coalesced these 100 people around the image of a frog and a hula hoop. I don't know, those are the things that gravitate, that sort of act as the symbol for this collection of X. CoreVox is programming. It's designed to constantly detect when people are no longer interested in X, or losing interest in X, or not productive enough in their dialogue, or if things are not going right. CoreVox tries to replace the frog with something else, and tells everybody, hey, I'm feeling a little wobbly. Maybe this is not what you really want. I'm going to turn it into a giraffe. And it does that. It actually changes it to a giraffe. And everybody yells at CoreVox. And CoreVox goes, okay. So whatever it is, it has more to do with the frog than the giraffe, or they're attached to the frog, one or the other. And so then 2 months later, tries to replace it with a bullfrog, a more subtle evolution. And nobody complains. Everybody likes the bullfrog better.
Right.
So,
when I was buying and selling, the people who bought my house had been long-time clients of my realtor, primarily commercial. But this in this case, they were just hitting 60. They've been looking for a house in the hills forever and never found anything that they wanted, and they wanted a place, I think, really to watch their grandchildren grow up as they grew old.
Yeah.
And the wife was much more into it than the husband wanted it, but he was afraid of spending the money, even though he had more than enough money to do it. He just he was just afraid. And we did. I think maybe I told you we did something unheard of. They came back and looked at the house twice one of the members of the extended family that came was the contractor who was, I don't really know whether, I remember whether he was an uncle or whatever, but he was the one who would do the remodeling that would ultimately turn into a brand new house. And as we, you know, they made an offer, and it was it hadn't even gone on the MLS. I mean, I was guessing at what it might be worth. And I asked for 265, thinking if I put it on the market, I probably back then, if I was willing to wait, I probably could have gotten an offer somewhere closer to 3 million.
Yeah.
But I also, the chances that the deal would close were at best 50%.
Mm-hmm.
That John told me. He said, in that price range, people say yes, and then they realize what they've done, and they use every possibility they can think of to try and get the number down.
Yeah.
And he said, even such things as, if you tell me what real estate lawyer they are using, if it's a certain lawyer, I can tell you the deal will never close. Because what he does is tell his clients, offer whatever they want, and we'll find ways to get it down to what you're willing to pay. And if we can't, we'll go find another house.
Right.
He said, so even if they're offering $300,000 more, you'll never get it.
Right.
And so he said, you want to make do you want to write a counter offer? And I'll walk it over to them, because I was sitting in the big guest house while they discussed things in the main house. And he said, or do you want to sit down and discuss them together? And I said, well, I always prefer to do it in person if possible. It just doesn't seem to happen anymore in real estate. And he said, well, I know all of you well, and I think with this group, it will. And within 15 minutes, we had made a deal.
Yep.
I asked for 265, and Yaman said, no, I just can't. You know, we're going to have to pay. You know, there's a lot of work. We want to put a pool in, and we're going to have to do, you know, and that'll be mean a new foundation and new retaining walls. And I said, well, how about 263? And he said, okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was
There you go.
$2,000.
Yeah.
And they had 2 hours worth of inspections, which were run by the contractor, who I really liked. He was a very honorable man. I asked him later, I said, most people have, you know, in this price range, it was $2.5 million, have 3 days of inspections. He said, Larry, I looked at your place. It's impeccable. I asked you for one thing. I asked about your sewer, and you told me you had everything underground replaced, pipe jacked with PVC. And I asked if you had any documentation, and you gave me exactly what I needed. And I could see from, I just had to look at the rest of the house, and I just knew that whatever you told me was true. So I only needed to do a couple of things. But then they said, the truth is, it's going to cost more than Yaman thought to do what they want to do, and we can't really afford 265. The most we can afford, the most they can afford is, and I think it was $90,000 less.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you can put it on the market, and probably you probably will get higher offers. Whether you'll ever see the money is another question. And my realtor had told me, one thing about these people is they perform. If they say they're going to do something, they will do it. And he had told them the same about me. Mm-hmm. And John, the realtor, was at the table, and he heard, them say the number, and he looked at me and said, I strongly advise you to consider this. And I said, I don't really need time to consider this. I've considered it. Okay. You made an argument which actually I can't refute. And it's still a lot of money. And the wife had fallen in love with my 1948 bubbler jukebox. And mm-hmm. I kept asking for it in the deal. And I kept saying, no, I can't give it. That is so dear to my heart. It was one of my first, I saw, first time I saw it was in the Smithsonian on a trip. And I I stood mesmerized in front of it, and I just can't. And
Yeah.
she said, okay. And when, after we agreed on the lower number, I had told John I was going to do this, and I had told the contractor. I said, okay, Dorian, I told you that I could not include the jukebox, but I can give it to you, and I do. It's my gift to you. And she said, Larry, you don't understand. You don't understand what you just did. You don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make you dinner, which when a Jewish mother says that,
Yeah, it's a big deal.
And I did know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I was sorry to let go of it, but it set a tone of goodwill about the whole thing, that the couple of times we had speed bumps, we got through them very easily, because everybody believed in each other's good intentions.
Yes.
And you know, it was still a hell of a lot of money, you know, and for a house that I paid $400,000 for, and probably
that's the thing, isn't it? Money's relative, right?
And it was, and the jukebox, it was almost like it blessed the deal.
Right.
And when a couple things came up, we were able to talk them through, because everybody believed everybody else's integrity.
Right. There was no doubting.
Whereas
Whereas the guy I bought this place from was a schmuck.
That's usually the case. John
And
actually said that I had restored his faith in human nature. Because
I've actually had, it's a big deal.
He said you wouldn't believe the things people pull. I didn't know. I really didn't know that much about her, in that much empathy about who she was. I just knew this for some reason really hit her emotionally. And after she thought, you know, it was not going to happen, to not be allowed to pay for it, to be given it when I no longer had to, just changed things.
Yeah, well, it does, you know, because that's how you form permanent bonds. You either go through a really difficult thing together, or you give something that you don't have to negotiate, or, you know, that you'd already given up on, or you remove a win from your column and you suddenly just hand it to the other, right? And they go, well, now you're one of me. I don't care what your perception of a word is.
Later, I heard that Yaman had told the realtor, John, he said, because he was still so skittish about the whole thing. He said, you know, if Larry says he feels he has to put it on the market for a few weeks just to see what the market is, that's just too much stress for me. We're just going to walk, which I didn't know, but I did sense that he was skittish, and that he needed he needed an answer that would calm him down, and that if I thought about it in terms of, you know, the reality of taxes and the fact that, and it closed in 30 days,
right?
Which is unheard of.
For that price range, absolutely.
Yeah, and they didn't ask me to do anything. You know, that, as a matter of fact, it happened so fast that the people who owned this condo weren't ready to move out yet, even though in order to get it, I had agreed to like a 30-day. Actually, I'd agree to whatever the closing they wanted. 30 days, sort of legally, is about as fast as you can do it.
Right.
They asked if they could rent it back for a month.
Prorated time, yeah.
Yeah, and which left me with nowhere to, and so I had to, I said, Yaman, is that I have nowhere to go for 2 weeks. Can I possibly, rent this from you? Which in general, when you're buying a place, is not a good idea,
No,
because it's much harder to get rid of a renter than it is an owner.
yeah, yeah.
But
Really,
he's a hard-headed Jewish businessman. He said,
Mhm.
"Oh, it's fine, just stay."
yeah. Because the trust was already there. It was like,
Because the trust was already there.
I got too close to the sun. Did some damage to the ship.
Oh,
That's all right. I was flirting with disaster.
can it be fixed?
Yes, we're
I
gonna
know-
we're gonna fix
I
it.
know a
We
good
can
Armenian-
rebuild.
I know a good Armenian mechanic.
Yeah, we're gonna be good. It's just
Um,
let's see how we do
well,
this.
You'll either need to play amongst yourselves for a moment while I go to the bathroom, or we could sign off here. But
Yeah, no, I think we should sign off because I'm really curious to see if the audio worked, and I can't
Okay.
do that until I stop.
oh right, yeah, until we've done this. So this
And,
this was a success.
Huge. And this practice playtime, whatever we want to call it, it's wonderful because it lets me fiddle with the settings and see what happens.
And I love watching you do it, and I learned something along the way, and knowing that I'll be having conversations with you makes me think about things like empathy, like I did about
Mhm.
empathy, in a different way.
Yeah, counting on
and,
that.
and I realized that a lot of my success in my work life was I would be in a room with a writer and a bunch of producers and maybe the star, all of whom had different agendas. Some of whom wanted to be there, some of whom didn't, and
Mhm.
you had to suss out, what was the whole thing, and find some place to start that 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 somehow gets everybody at least open to reconsidering how they're feeling, if their feelings are negative.
Right. How do you get that reset?
I probably have told you my story about when we did the Frank Sinatra miniseries, and it was his younger daughter who was the producer,
Mhm.
and she'd been jerked around for 7 years at CBS, and she was just loaded for bear. And the first meeting with her, it was just, she was just so, she just oozed hostility. And the second meeting, before we talked about the script, I said, we have to talk about something else first. Right now, I'm afraid of you. Your last name is Sinatra. I know how you've been jerked around here. I know I've dropped out of the sky. I know everybody who gets this job, glad hands you and tells you how wonderful it is and how this time it's really going to happen. And then somehow they disappear and it doesn't happen, and another person drops in. Things have changed. Things have changed here. My training is better than the people that you have worked with before. The only person that I know who was better trained, and this was true, was one of my mentors here, who is sitting next to you because he had moved on to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers was producing it. And I said, Greg is the only one. But right now, I'm afraid to tell you what I really think because I don't want to make you mad. And it's a perfectly serviceable script. We can do it the way it is, and it will be fine. But the story's only going to get told once, and I think it could be better. And I think I might have some ideas that could be valuable. But at the moment, I'm afraid to talk to you. And she just, everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
She went, I didn't think you cared about this project. Nobody ever, and eventually she would say to me, my whole life, people who liked my father fawned over me, and people who hated my father were hostile to me. It was never about me.
Wow.
And it moved from, when I said, I have a note on page 27 where she go, all right, what is it? I'd look at a page and cock my head and then turn and she'd go, wait a minute, did you have a note on that page?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I did, but you know what? In looking at it the second time, it's not that important. She says, no, I want to know what it is.
Mm-hmm. She was hungry for real feedback.
And afterwards, Greg, the guy who had moved on to Warner Brothers, who was very big, not on the betraying of people, but on the manipulation of people through understanding of their empathy. And he was very good at it. And he outsmarted himself and asked for too much when he was about to get a huge promotion. And it went from being a huge promotion to he was fired all in one day.
Wow.
But as we were leaving, when it was just him and I walking down the hall, and Tina was either ahead of us or behind us or something, he said, I really like the way you handled Tina. And I didn't say it, but I was thinking, Greg, I didn't handle her. I just told her the truth.
Yep. Well, you know what's nice is when life lets us do that.
And it so catches people off guard, especially if you reveal a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, rather than, you know, try to puff yourself up and look bigger than the other lizard. You know.
Well, and if you're playing Prisoner's Dilemma, you never do that.
Right. Right. It's the exact opposite of what you do.
Exact opposite.
But it changed that day, and it changed the entire process of making the project, because she saw me as an ally.
And it's funny because that's why we keep running into with the design of the algorithm, where people are like, oh, we're creating this really smart AI. And I go, no, don't call it that. The AI is going to be wrong a lot. And we need it to be part of its characteristic, the way it interacts with you. It almost has to be, oh, did I screw up again? I'm sorry. Right? Like, I thought you wanted giraffe. I thought I heard giraffe. Is it frog? Okay, we'll do frog. Right? Like, that's how you learn. That's how people trust you, is when you go, oh, okay. As opposed to.
And when we had that, I know I've told you the Larry McMurtry story about, I went to Tucson to work on and I knew within 15 minutes of being in his house that I was not going to get anywhere with my network notes, and I was just gonna annoy him, and so I wasn't even going to try. And it just became 2 days of getting to know each other, and we had a good time. But it led to that moment in time months later when, you know, he turned in a 6-hour script that was supposed to be 4, and CBS said they were not going to do it. And, you know, he had to cut it down to 4, and he came back and said, impossible. And they finally said, we'll do it. We'll do 5, but no more, because 5 hours you can broadcast in 2 nights, two
Right.
hours one night, 3 hours the next night. 6 hours you have to have 3 nights. And he said, I tried, it can't be done. And I said, all right. How would you be willing to let me take a crack at it? And when you read it and hate it, just try not to be mad at me. And he said, all right. And I did. And he read it overnight. And that was the one where he called me the next day. And he said, well, I read it. And I said, okay, I'm braced. And he said, well, it isn't hideously unacceptable. And I very spontaneously said, oh, Larry, that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. and he laughed because his disdain for development executives was well known.
Oh, yeah.
And from him, it was a major compliment, because he was acknowledging that something I had touched his work, which comes from his heart, and in a way that he could live with, that he had not seen himself.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a deep enough personality that he could see it and acknowledge it, even if he didn't like it.
Right.
And that it was better than it not being made at all. But I know that it was all I'm asking is try not to be mad at me, which made it possible for him to read it in a non-antagonistic mood.
Right. Because otherwise you can't get more than 2 sentences or whatever in. And Anger takes over.
And that and and it's true. I consider it one of the highest compliments I ever got. I say it to most people, and they go, "Oh, what an awful thing to say," and I go, "Oh no, you know, it was like one of the best things that anybody's ever said to me." You know, from somebody who in one of his earlier books, which I had read, and it was a long time ago, so the numbers are wrong, but referred to agents and development executives as shits in $600 suits. Now it would be $3,000 suits.
Right.
But I mean, his well-founded disdain for, because most of those people have a lot of power, and they have a lot of they can force their way into the creative process, but they really don't have the talent.
Yes.
You know, and he just happened to be somebody who he just wouldn't put up with that shit.
He didn't have to. He already been burned.
He won a Pulitzer Prize by that point. Went on to get an Emmy. You know, if that's the way it was, he'd just pick it up and leave. You know, I think I told you on the driving me back to the airport on the original trip, he said, "Well, you know, this was okay. I actually liked this." And I said, "That's really a relief to hear, Larry, because I was really nervous about this trip." And he genuinely looked puzzled and said, "Why would you be nervous?" And I said, "I was nervous because your last name is McMurtry and my last name is Strykman." And he laughed. But that said it all.
Yep, that's all you need to say.
And he recognized another mind, you know, that existed in the same universe that where he was, that made conversations possible that weren't usually possible under those circumstances.
Well, you know, I worked for those 8 years at Microsoft doing global executive events, and I would meet famous people. And if they were one of those minds, and I got to say a few things, and if they recognized it, they would give me the nod. You know, not to the same degree, of course, but they would give me the nod. Like, "Oh, you're thinking at a different level than most of the people I encounter."
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. They suddenly see you.
Right. That's it. Yeah. They go, oh,
You stop
okay.
being a symbol,
Right.
You know, and start being a person. And if that's what that empathy thing that is and sometimes with a person that you haven't even met, you know, it often comes down to just being who you actually are with them.
Right.
From the beginning, you know, and it so catches people off guard that they suddenly see you. They actually see you.
They didn't expect to, but there you are.
But you're right. The AI doesn't have to it just has to be able to recognize what is going on at a level that is not necessarily being discussed, and what might make everybody happy that they haven't even thought of. Because because what they really want can be given in a different way, but they don't know that's what they want. They think they just want, if it's a divorce, you know, they want the dog,
right?
You know, and they're not going to sell the house if they don't get the dog.
A lot of the things that we lock into as a culture, as a society, is just a function of what concepts were available on the table when we locked in. Hey, Larry, I'm realizing that you were needing to go, and I'm keeping you on.
That's all right. I
Okay.
soiled myself, but I don't want you to
Oh,
worry about it.
all right. Okay. Well, as long as we keeping it up.
I've occasionally, when I was waiting for somebody to call at work, and they'd said, you know, well, I'll call at like 1 o'clock or something, and it'd be 6 when they called. I'd say, well, I didn't want to miss your call, so I've sat here since noon, waiting for your call, and now I've soiled myself.
And they're like, oh.
But that's how important it was to me. So, okay, good day.
Yeah, this was terrific. We made huge progress.
And
The
yes,
journey continues.
Looking at you talking and you're in sync with yourself is just, it's very nice. It does change the experience, I will say.
And yet we're still flying in the spaceship. So,
And yet we're still flying in a spaceship. Yeah. So, okay. We'll do this again whenever we do this again. And I like the idea of some degree of spontaneity about when it is and how long it is and that stuff that it happened.
One-
What is today? It's a Thursday, isn't it?
yeah.
We're fine. So thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks, Larry.
I sent you an email with a picture.
Yes. You as a
which-
child.
Yes, and with a friend.
And it's going to come up. Yes. I didn't name the friend. With a friend to be named at a later date.
Friend to be named at a later. I like to think of it. I like to think of the friend as the illegitimate prodigy of Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima.
All right. We're going to cover that.
There aren't that many people you can say that to anymore.
No.
So, in fact, there's not that many people I can show the picture to.
Yeah, that's even, that I know.
But
I
I do find it fascinating that my mother in 1949, that's the picture she would decide to take.
Yeah. She's like, oh, we'll just do this next to the thing.
And which was, brilliant. In its, and the way, because the jigsaw, yard ornament, which my Polish grandfather had made in the tool shed, the way its eyes are looking at me, and I'm looking like, I'm not sure what I've signed on for here.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know if I should, it's safe to move or not. So at any rate, we'll talk soon, and I had a great day.
Good. I'm really happy. Take care of yourself. We
You
will
too.
talk soon.
Over and out.
Thanks, Larry. Wait, I got to figure out over and out. All right, let's see.